Today's video is brought to you by Slay the Brother. My name is Killtrap, and my brother and I make videos mainly about Magic the Gathering. In today's video, I would like to showcase a mainly mono-green deck I made for Historic. The goal of this deck was to get large creatures out on the field while hindering the growth of life gain decks, and decks that like to build their creatures up slowly over time with 1/1 counters and enter the battlefield triggers. The first part of that is Elesh Norn, Mother of Machines. For 5 mana, we get a 4/7 with Vigilance, but what we need her for is her ability. Whenever a permanent we control entering causes an ability to trigger, under our control, that ability triggers twice. But whenever a permanent entering causes an ability to trigger on your opponent's side, that ability will not trigger. So something like Soul Warden becomes completely useless to them. And then Vorinclex, Monstrous Raider. 6 mana for a 6/6 with Trample and Haste is great. And if you didn't grow up being traumatized by this guy, well, you're lucky. This guy's ability reads, if you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or a player, put twice that many on them instead. If an opponent would put any amount of counters on a permanent or a player, they put half that many on there instead. Rounded down, of course. But what's half of 1 rounded down? 0. And these two work wonderfully with Railway Brawler. He's a 5 mana 5/5 with Reach and Trample. They have Plot 4, which can sometimes work out good, especially if we were able to get this combo out quicker through that. But mainly whenever another creature you control enters, put X+1/+1 counters on it, where X is its power. So having Elesh Norn, Mother of Machines, makes it like having 2 Railway Brawlers out at once. And things get crazy when Vorinclex, Monstrous Raider, is involved. Now, we're mono green, so how we get there should be painfully obvious. We have Mana Dorks. Delighted Halfling. You can tap her to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. But if you're casting a legendary spell, it can be a mana of any color you choose. And a nifty benefit of this is that that spell cannot be countered. Utopia Sprawl is another great mana dork for this deck. It's an enchantment where you enchant a forest. You choose a color whenever Utopia Sprawl enters. Whenever you tap the enchanted forest for mana, it adds 1 mana of that color in addition to the color you tapped it for. And this doesn't just need to be on a basic forest if you weren't aware of that. It can be on one of those plain forest or mountain forest, just as long as the card itself says it's a forest. Our next one is Gwenna Izagaya. She's a legendary creature for 3 mana. You can tap her to add 2 mana of any combination of colors to your mana pool. You may only use this mana for creatures or their abilities, though. So we can't use it to cast Kyora. But whenever you cast a creature with power 5 or greater, put a 1/1 counter on her and untap her. So we can get a lot of uses out of this one creature. Kyora, Behemoth Beckoner. A lot of people use her like a mana dork. I do in this deck. You know, it's great. -1, you can untap target permanent. If that permanent happens to be a land with Utopia Sprawl on it, that's a lot of value right there. You're getting 4 mana from just 1 land, and you can use her 7 times. Another great part about having her in this deck is card advantage. Whenever a creature you control with power 4 or greater enters, you draw a card. That is almost all your creatures. Outside of Delighted Halfling and Gwenna Izagaya, that is all your creatures. We've already gone over the key pieces of this deck: Elesh Norn, Mother of Machines, Railway Brawler, and Vorinclex, Monstrous Raider. We have Outcaster Trailblazer, just 2 copies of him. They kind of work like a light Korra, because they'll give us the card advantage we need, and you can occasionally get use out of that 1 mana they produce when you play them. If you're really hurting for mana, you can plot them for 3 mana and get 1 extra mana next turn. You never know when that could pay off. Polychronos Reborn. I love this guy. We have a 4/5 with Reach for 3 mana. That's very solid. We can transform them for 6 mana and 2 life, or if we have almost any of our mana dorks on the field, we can just pay the extra mana, white mana, and not have to pay the 2 life to transform them into Polychronos Engine of Ruin. Our next creature is Vorinclex / the Grand Evolution. Now this is just a personal preference of mine. I don't think they're needed for the deck like a lot of the other cards are. You could easily replace this with Storm the Festival. Surak and Goreclaw are one of the final creatures in our deck. They're a 6/5 with trample for 6 mana. Their ability is great though. Other creatures you control have trample. Even though a lot of our creatures in this deck do have trample, Elish Norm doesn't, Polychronos Reborn doesn't, Outcast Trailblazer doesn't, even though we only have 2 copies of them. So they're nice to have for that ability, but it's the final part of their ability. Whenever another non-token creature you control enters, put a 1/1 counter on it. It gains haste until end of turn. This is kind of a way to just become really aggressive in our end stages of the game. One of the points of this deck was to have big, hefty creatures. Nothing's worse than having your big, hefty creatures sit there to just get wiped out. So giving them haste is great for that. We have 3 copies of Tyvar's Stand in here. Instant speed, target creature you control gets +X/+X, and they gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So it costs X and 1 green. If we happen to have the spare mana laying around, we have a creature with trample, maybe we can use this to swing for the kill if we don't need to make a creature hexproof and indestructible. But a lot of people, when they see Vorinclex Monstrous Raider enter the field, their PTSD triggers and they just try to take it off right away. Same thing with Elish Norn, Mother of Machines. She's going to lock a lot of life gain decks out of the game. She's going to lock a lot of decks that get incremental +1/+1 counters on their creatures out of the game. Anyone that revolves around enter the battlefield abilities, they're fucked if she's in play. So they will want to get rid of her. For my land spread, I have 2 copies of Bozuju, I can never pronounce it. The Land Who Endures. Channel it for 2 mana, you discard it. It destroys target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land. The controller of that permanent, however, gets to search their library for a land, basic land, and put it in play, untapped. So be careful when you do this. You don't want to set people up to retaliate against you for retaliating against them. I have 17 forest. We're running 22 lands altogether, so that's the first 19. And then I have 3 Plaza of Heroes. This is just another way to ensure our legendary creatures stay alive. I mean, almost every creature in this deck is legendary. Now I want to take a second to talk about some of the alternative cards you can put in this deck too. Obviously, if you don't feel comfortable running a deck like this with 1 hard white cast card in there without anything, why not put in the Shocklands? I mean, they're forest plains. As I said earlier, if you weren't aware of this, Utopia Sprawl does not need to target a basic land. It can target any land that's a forest. Nixthos Shrine to Nyx would probably be a pretty good land for this deck. I've seen people get ridiculous with that land, especially when they have a Kyora Behemoth Beckoner on the field. I just personally don't have it. I should probably invest in a full playset. Because there's obviously, you would have a pretty high devotion to green with this deck. Vorinclex / the Grand Evolution. I just have them in there because I like them. They have a nifty interaction with the other pieces of this deck. It would just feel good to get that off, even if I know it's not really necessarily helping my win rate. If you want this deck to be a little more aggressive, maybe work in Olivenwald Oddity. They're a great creature, 4/4 with haste and trample. They can transform for 7 and give all your other creatures a buff. They're an awesome creature, and they will push this deck more aggressively to start pushing the opponent back before we start going off. Old World Troll is a great creature. He's a common 3-drop in Historic. You know, when they die, they enchant a land and basically become just like Utopia Sprawl. And then you get recursion out of it because you can sacrifice that land, pay 1 mana, and you get another 4/4 out on the field. So, you know, there's a reason that guy's a staple. And honestly, I kind of consider should I work them in this deck over Polychronos Reborn. Or maybe just over Vorinclex. Yeah. Another great creature you could add to this deck is Voracious Hydra. For 2 green mana and X, they enter the battlefield with X 1/1 counters on them. And then when they enter, you get to choose 1. Double the number of 1/1 counters on Voracious Hydra, or they fight target creature you don't control. Now, I don't want to know how bonkers and off the wall this shit's going to get if you have Railway Brawler, Elish Norm, and Vorinclex, the Monstrous Raider, on the field. It's just going to get vulgar. If you want to make your deck bigger, though, that's definitely one of your go-to options. And of course, if you can't decide, maybe I want to go bigger, maybe I want to ramp on mana more, you know, that's where Old Growth Troll is good. Why not just go with Gold Vein Hydra. You know, they're a great solid creature for a lot of decks. And if you feel the need, you want to be more aggressive and maybe bait out some removal. If their removal kills your creature, it's a win for you. You baited out a kill spell, and you get treasure tokens. If they exile the creature, that still may kind of be a win for you, because that's one less spell to target one of your crucial pieces. Thank you for watching this video. My brother and I really appreciate it. Don't forget to give us a like and a subscribe if you enjoyed what you saw. Please come back and check out our other content.